Silvarum by Dean Kuhta. Narrated by Dan Bottomley. Prologue. "The woods seem sombre," said Verdi. "They're the same damn woods they've always been," replied her brother Tasso. He expelled a dramatic sigh, pausing along the trail. "You promised you weren't going to chicken out on me again. Are we going, or do you want to turn back?" "No, we're going. We must. I'm not scared this time." A chorus of brittle leaves trembled in the night breeze. The bony fingers of ancient oaks pointed into the darkness, beckoning the travellers to continue. Crickets chirped amidst the call of a distant whippoorwill. Verdi snapped to attention at each sound. "Are you sure?" asked Tasso, laughing. "Yes." They advanced along the forest trail as it curled around clusters of sycamores and dipped through mist-enveloped creek beds. Their pace was confident, yet they remained observant. The woods were indeed a familiar environment to both, yet the purpose of this errand was of an unusual nature. "Tell me again what I'm supposed to do while you're inside," asked Verdi. "All you have to do is be my lookout," he replied. "Like a sentry, you know?" "I know what a sentry is. I'm not stupid." "I'm glad to hear that, because it's a simple job. Just keep an eye out for that groundskeeper. There shouldn't be anyone else around this time of night. Plus, it won't take me long. I'll pop in and out before you know it, and then we'll have our prize." "How much do you think it's worth?" "That depends on the buyer. That one vendor from Gravesend said he'd give me 200 gold for it. But then Lonzo claimed that if we can get it to him before he closes tomorrow, he'd pay 375. He's full of shit, though. He can't possibly think I've forgotten what he pulled on Victor last summer." "Was that the mix-up with the little mechanical device?" "Yeah, but it wasn't a mix-up at all. Victor let Lonzo borrow the device for the weekend so he could analyse it, and then the guy conveniently loses it." Tasso made air quotes with his fingers. "We go into this other shop in CAAT a week later and see the damn thing sitting on the shelf. It still had the little scrapes on it from when Victor tried to open the case. I've never trusted that guy. So if we can't count on him, do you think 200 will be enough? Can you haggle with that other dealer?" "I can try, but he's a stubborn old geezer. I do trust him, though. He's a lot more familiar with this type of technology than I am. And if he says it's worth that much, then I believe him." "But is 200 enough to get Carl back?" Tasso took a sip from his water pouch and wiped his mouth. "I hope so." They continued along the trail in silence. The faint glow of Tasso's lantern was their only light. It bobbed from side to side as he held it aloft. The hum of the crickets blended with the hoot of an occasional owl. A heavy downpour from the previous day had left the forest musty and damp. They entered the eastern edge of Blackwood Forest and soon flanked the gentle slopes of Maple Hill. Verdi peered up to its crest and saw strange shapes in the mist. Ancient standing stones and peculiar monoliths protruded from the turf. She had seen the structures on several occasions in the daylight, but something about them this evening seemed off. Their shapes and angles were wrong. Verdi focused her eyes into the gloom. "Hey," said Tasso, pinching her arm. She leapt with a panicked squeak. "God damn it, don't do that." "I thought you weren't scared out here." "I'm not, but cut that shit out, will you?" "Sorry," said her brother. "I looked back and you weren't there. What are you doing?" Verdi composed herself and motioned towards the grassy dome that emerged from the canopy. "What am I looking at? The trees?" "No," she replied, pointing to the shapes on the hill. The shapes were gone. Maple Hill itself was gone. "There were stones up there," she muttered. "What?" "The statues on Maple Hill," said Verdi. "I know the place. It was right there a second ago, and I saw weird things on it. Strange shapes." Tasso was losing his patience. "Right, I don't see anything like that now, so it must have been the mist or something." He turned back to the trail and held up the lantern. "Let's get going. We're not far now." Verdi hesitated, uncertain of her perception. She glanced back to the phantom hill, shook her head in confusion, and then trotted up the trail to her brother. "Can I ask you something?" Tarso said once he heard the leaves crunching behind him again. Sure. It's about Carl. Okay. Even if we do sell this thing for enough money, and they actually give him back, how the hell are we going to explain all this to Mum and Dad? I have no idea. I haven't thought that far ahead. I'm still struggling with the fact that our little brother's been kidnapped, and it's our fault. That's not exactly true. Really? We left Carl with her, and now he's gone. How's that not our fault? We don't know for sure that she did it. Why would our teacher be involved with something like this? I saw her do it. She passed him off to some other lady and they disappeared into the crowd. The expression on Carl's face still haunts me. He was so scared and confused. For God's sake, he's only 5. I'm going to kill them, said Tarso. Who? The bastards who took him. I'm not letting them get away with this. I don't care how tough they think they are. Once we get Carl back, I'm going after them. All right, but let's focus on our current ordeal, okay? I can barely comprehend what we're about to do, let alone fight some strange adults. Tarso looked back at his sister with raised eyebrows. I thought you'd try to discourage me. Why would I? I want the people who did this punished just as much as you do. But a bunch of kids are going to have a hard time. If you really want to go after them, we'll need help. Can I see the letter again? Asked Tarso. Why? You know what it says. Just give it to me. There's a description of the device and I need to look at it for a second. Verdi took a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. Here. Thanks, said Tarso, holding it up to the lantern. The flickering light revealed a few paragraphs of text and a roughly drawn map. Several symbols and cryptic notes were scattered around the edges. Did you find it? Asked Verdi. Yep, said Tarso. He blew out the lantern and crouched behind a fallen tree stump. What's wrong? We're here. A gentle rain fell as Tarso and Verdi examined the mausoleum. Its stonework was crumbling and ancient. A grand pediment was held high by a cluster of Corinthian columns. Hieroglyphs were carved into the surfaces, but from this distance they appeared diffuse and elusive. To either side of the structure was a scattering of well-kept gravestones and statues. Several bouquets rested before the stony epitaphs of departed loved ones. A break in the clouds revealed the pale flush of a waxing crescent amid the overlap of distant fir trees. Are you ready? Asked Tarso. No, but we have to do this for Carl. That's the spirit. Tarso stowed his lantern in his backpack and crept around to the edge of the tree stump. This place is definitely active, but I don't see any signs of that creepy groundskeeper. His name's Jarvis, whispered Verdi. I remember him from when we were little. I used to see him in town occasionally when Mum dragged me around on her errands. He would always tip his hat and smile. He's not that bad. Maybe, but I doubt he's going to throw a party if the two of you are reunited now. Verdi rolled her eyes. Let's get this over with. With a final glance to either side of the trail, they dashed across the wet leaves and into the cemetery. The fabric of their cloaks brushed against the dimpled stone of the main structure as they sought shelter in its shadows. Tarso eased around the corner of the mausoleum to look through the space between the front columns. He peered into the darkness for a moment, and then climbed onto the portico. Wait, said Verdi. Tarso scaled the side and disappeared. Shit. Verdi crouched back down to the ground and frantically surveyed her surroundings. The rain had picked up and the deep rumble of distant thunder mingled with the swell of blowing leaves. Verdi felt a sudden emptiness in her stomach. A sense of dread washed over her. She wanted to get away. Psst, whispered Tarso from above. He poked his head between the columns. Where are you going? I don't like this plan anymore. Something's not right. What are you talking about? It's fine. The front door is unlocked. Stay here and keep a lookout and I'll be right back. Verdi stared back at her brother with terrified eyes. Please, Taz, let's get out of here and come back tomorrow during the day. God damn it, no, he said with a flash of rage. You were too chicken shit to do this during the day like yesterday. What makes you think you're going to be brave tomorrow? We'll get caught during the day anyway. Now stay here and keep watch and quit being such a damn baby. Tasso vanished again without another word. Verdi sunk into the shadows of the outer wall and raised her hood. Why did he have to always yell at her like that? She took a deep breath and watched the trail and surrounding tree line. The tapping of raindrops on leaves melded with the sound of swaying branches in the wind. She forgot about the unpleasantness of her current situation for a moment and absorbed the calming sounds. Clank, clank, clank. Verdi spun to her left at the noise. "Tasso, is that you?" There was no response. She waited a few more moments and then called out again. Still nothing. The emptiness in her stomach was unbearable. Her heartbeat raced and her vision faded around the edges. It was another panic attack for certain. "Not now," she said. "Please, not now." She thought about her little brother Carl and how scared he must be at this very moment. Where did his captors have him? Was he locked in a room? A cage? Was he in pain? Whatever horrors he was experiencing were infinitely worse than some noises in a little graveyard. She needed to be strong for him and do her part. Verdi blinked away her trepidation and looked back to where she had heard the clanking. She cocked her head and listened. Clank, clank. There it was again, but not as harsh as the first time. Verdi tiptoed to the back corner of the structure and slowly peered around the corner. She laughed to herself. A broken water pump handle knocked against the rusted face of its central casing. "Jarvis won't be happy about that," she said as she turned around. She knelt in her hiding spot and continued her sentry duty. The rain and wind had stopped, and the lingering moan of thunder was barely discernible in the distance. The crickets resumed their previous chorus. Verdi examined her surroundings again. The trail that faded into the forest, the looming oak trees with their bony fingers, the wet leaves and grass that covered the small plot of graves. She sighed and looked up at the dark space between the mausoleum columns. Tasso should be back by now. A face looked back at her, but it was not her brother's. "Fuck!" she screamed and scrambled to her feet. "Girl, what are you doing there?" shouted an old man. It was the groundskeeper. I stuttered Verdi. She was frozen with fear. "This is private property. Get out of here now or you'll be in some real trouble." "I can't," she said. "What do you mean you can't? Be gone." "My brother's inside and I can't leave him." "You're grave robbers then," sneered Jarvis. "You know what the punishment is for robbing graves? Death." The old man pulled a dagger from his belt. "Stay right where you are, little lady." Footfalls smacked upon the front steps as Jarvis raced around the structure. He was dreadfully nimble. Verdi spun on her heels and sprinted in the direction of the broken water pump. The saturated turf impeded her pace and caused her to kick up bits of dirt and mud. She slipped to one knee but managed to catch herself and continue forward. The enraged breathing of the groundskeeper was right behind her. She raced around the back wall and paused at the adjacent corner. She had two options for escape. Option 1 was to burst through the tree line and run like hell through the forest, abandoning her brother and probably ruining the only real chance they had at obtaining enough money to save Carl. The second option was to descend into an open cellar that resided to her left and led to God knows where. Verdi only had a few seconds to make her decision before she had to confront option 3. Hand-to-hand combat with a crazy old man wielding a blade. Unsure if she was making the right decision, she leapt into the cellar, slamming and latching the door behind her. Her new environment was pitch black. She reached into the stale air for a wall or anything solid to guide her path. Behind her, the locked cellar door rattled, muting the shouts of the groundskeeper. He would surely run around to the front entrance and continue his pursuit. But for the time being, she was safe. Verdi stepped forward into the unknown. Her boot knocked into a metallic case, spilling tools across the dirt floor. She hopped away from the clatter, brushing against the solid stone of a wall. With both hands, she followed its coarse texture until her fingertips met the grooves of a doorway. She turned a handle and entered a torchlit chamber. Stacks of coffins lined the walls and floor. Across the room, an open passageway beckoned. From its mouth radiated a series of disconcerting sounds, tormented cries for mercy amid the taunts of malicious laughter. One of the voices sounded like Tarso. Verdi navigated between the caskets and descended a flight of stairs. She reached the bottom and gasped. Her brother lurched forward on his knees, streams of blood flowing from his mouth and nose. Standing over him loomed a tall man. In the torchlight, Verdi noticed a thin, crimson scar that ran vertically from his eyebrow down to the middle of his cheek. The man looked up and examined the girl. "Is this the brave sister that you were mumbling about?" he said as he propelled a heavy boot into Tarso's stomach. The boy sobbed in pain and vomited. The man casually stepped away from the mess. "Well, she certainly doesn't look like she's going to save you. As a matter of fact, she looks positively terrified." Verdi had succumbed to the most extreme panic attack of her young life. All logic and perception had evaporated from her current reality. "Grab her." Powerful hands pulled Verdi from the steps and held a dagger to her throat. The stench of ale flowed from her assailant's smirking mouth. Resistance was impossible in her current state. She went limp and could only observe in terror. "Before we part ways," said the scarred man, unsheathing his longsword, "I wanted to commend the two of you, whoever you are, for your attempted gallantry this evening. Although you couldn't possibly have had any understanding of the device you sought to retrieve from this tomb, you were helpful in our efforts to acquire it. Your brother had located the artifact before my companions and I arrived, so that saved us a little time. And you, of course, were crucial in distracting that annoying Jarvis." Harsh laughter emanated from within the chamber. The scarred man shrugged at the absence of a response from either Tarso or Verdi. "Very well," he said, raising his sword. "Wait," said Tarso. The man hesitated. "What is it?" Tarso spit a wad of blood onto the floor. "I want to say something to my sister first." "By all means," replied the man. "I'm sorry, Verdi. I'm sorry I yelled at you earlier. You didn't deserve that. I love you." The scarred man nodded with approval. "Well said." A single swing sheared Tarso's head from his body. Blood erupted from the exposed cavity as his corpse fell to the floor. His arms twitched for a moment, and then was still. Verdi did not scream. "Interesting," said the scarred man as he approached. Verdi would meet her fate with the blade after all. The sensation as his sword's tip punctured her chest and sliced through her aorta was painful on a level that she could not process. A deep melancholy washed over her with the realization of her impending death. The man who clutched her from behind yanked her head back and dragged his blade across her exposed jugular. As she slipped into oblivion, Verdi's final thoughts were of her brother Carl and her parents.